I can't say how much I love that song. That was a great walkout song. I'm going to add that to my repertoire. Good evening, everyone. Oh, it's so good to see you. And I'm Wendy Jackson. I'm Managing Director of the Detroit program for the Kresge Foundation. And just again, really thrilled that you're here for what I think is going to be not only a profound conversation, but just one that's going to feed our soul. And the Kresge Foundation is truly excited to be able to partner with the Urban Consulate. This is our first time in partnership. And we're partnering on this new series called The Next Decade, Daring Ideas for the Future. And that kicks off tonight with this incredible conversation with Dr. Ayana Johnson and Adrienne Maree Brown. So as we gather tonight in this beautiful Garden Theater for this important and timely dialogue, it is essential that we recognize the deep history of the land that we stand on. We acknowledge that the city of Detroit resides on the traditional and ancestral land of the Anishinaabe peoples, including the Three Fires Confederacy of the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi nations. So this is the Kresge Foundation's 100-year anniversary. This is our centennial. Yes, we started in 1924. And to celebrate our centennial, we've welcomed to Detroit a number of great thinkers, intellectuals, including President Barack Obama. And tonight we're honored to welcome the brilliant and best-selling authors, Dr. Ayana Elizabeth Johnson and Adrienne Maree Brown. So as I said, this is our first partnership with the Urban Consulate. And for nearly a decade, the Urban Consulate has been bringing people together to share ideas for a more just and equitable community. And it is my great honor to introduce their host, who will be moderating the conversation this evening in just a sec. But I do want to acknowledge a couple of folks in the audience from the Kresge Foundation, my colleagues from our environment program. I believe Shamar Bibbins, who's the managing director for our environment program, might be here, but there are other colleagues from the foundation here from our environment program, our Detroit program, our communications team. So please welcome them as well. And I was told earlier today that we have a number of other philanthropies who are in the audience or will be joining us throughout the evening from the Water Funders Affinity Group. So welcome them. They were meeting in Flint earlier this week, and some of them changed their travel plans just to be here for this conversation. So it is my pleasure and honor to introduce a lifelong Detroiter and friend, Orlando P. Bailey. And Orlando learned how to practice community development on the east side, where he was born. He's passionate about shifting the narrative of Black cities and neighborhoods. And Orlando is an Emmy award-winning journalist, co-host of Authentically Detroit, and executive director, the new executive director of Outlier Media. Outlier is a nonprofit newsroom designed to center and respond to Detroiters' needs. And with that, please give a warm welcome for Orlando Bailey.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Urban Consulate. Y'all been asking, what is Urban Consulate doing? What's going on? We back tonight. Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to see all of your beautiful faces. We're gonna go ahead and get started. Y'all ready? All right. So, I am contractually obligated to read the bios, so let me do it. Dr. Ayana Elizabeth Johnson is a scientist, policy expert, writer, and teacher working to help create the best possible climate future. She co-founded and leads Urban Ocean Lab, a think tank for the future of coastal cities, and is the Rue Distinguished Scholar at Bowdoin College. Ayana authored New York Times best-selling book, What If We Get It Right? Visions of Climate Futures, co-edited the best-selling anthology, All We Can Save, co-created and co-hosted the Spotify Gimlet podcast, How to Save a Planet, and co-authored The Blue New Deal, a roadmap for including the ocean in climate policy. She earned a BA in Environmental Science and Public Policy from Harvard University and a PhD in Marine Biology from Scripps Institution of Oceanography. She serves on the board of directors for Patagonia and Green Wave and is on the advisory board of Environmental Border Project. Above all, Ayana is in love with climate solutions. I got one more bio to read. Adrienne Maree Brown. Detroit, make some noise for Adrienne Maree Brown. Is growing a garden of healing ideas informed by 27 years of movement facilitation, somatics, science fiction scholarship, and doula work. Adrienne has nurtured emergent strategy, pleasure activism, radical imagination, and loving correction as ideas and practices for transformation. Adrienne is the New York Times best-selling author, editor of several published texts, a ritual singer, songwriter, poet, co-generator of the Lineages of Change tarot deck, and co-creator and host of How to Survive the End of the World podcast with Autumn Brown. Adrienne's latest book, Loving Corrections, is now available from AK Press. Now, give a big Detroit warm Urban Consulate round of applause for Dr. Ayana and Adrienne Maree Brown. All right, this is a dream come true.
It is.
It is.
It
So I really want to get into it because Claire and I have been stalking y'all's work for a long time. Shout out to Claire Nelson, the founder of Urban Consulate. I don't know where she is.
We're pretty easy to stalk. We kind of put it out there.
Yeah.
We're very stalkable.
Yeah.
It's like, here's where I'm going to be. Please come.
Right. But even like that, even on a more granular level, like
Also,
watching.
here are my interstitial thoughts.
Yeah.
Yes.
But like watching what y'all like on social media and stuff like that.
Oh,
and
the actual
be
stalking.
seeing.
Wait, and you can see what I like?
Yeah, like so we be seeing y'all
Ayana-
liking each other's
Ayana's
posts
liking
and stuff
all of
like
Adrienne's posts.
that. I'm like, they are fangirling over each other,
Stalking her.
and vice versa.
And deeply vice versa.
We just got to have our first date.
Woo! I love that.
So
That's what we do. We bring people together.
we've been wanting to meet for so long. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm so happy that happened. How was it? How was the
Oh, it
first
was
day?
good. I'm like, can we have a drink after this?
Yeah.
Can we like have part two?
I was like, let's see how it
Ooh,
goes.
I want to go. Can I go? All right. So look, we got the first question. We are, and so disclaimer: we have over prepared for this conversation. Okay, and so what that means is I have prompts and I have a ton of questions. But sometimes what happens
Props?
with us,
Props?
Prompts and questions.
Oh, I was like,
and
is there like a
questions.
top hat? Like, what are we
Yeah.
doing?
Props. It's a
Prompts.
theatrical. We're in a
Okay.
theater and
I
we're going to
mean-
go
Yeah.
there.
And you know, I graduated from the school down the street, the Detroit High School for the Fine and Performing Arts. Achievers, make some noise. Okay, we got a couple.
Sure.
And so we're gonna start off by reading what we prepared, but I am certain that thank you. I'm certain that the conversation will enter into a divine space and we'll let it go from there.
Or just a lot of tangents.
That's
you know?
fine too. All right, so we're actually really thrilled to have you both here tonight, and thank you for writing 2 amazing books that I read cover to cover. Loving Corrections, I loved it, and What If We Get It Right? They rhyme so well with each other, right? And you come to us right on time because tonight we are sitting in Detroit one of America's largest majority black cities, we are also in a swing state, so we have been over-indexed and oversaturated with the presidential candidates and their delegates. And we are...
I also live in a swing state. It's the worst.
It's fun, right? And it's the week before a consequential national
No one
election.
gives a shit about Maine and our like 2 electoral college
We know what
votes.
you're gonna do. We know what you're gonna do.
We know what you're going to do in Maine.
We split our votes by district, so probably it's going to be 1 and 1 and just cancel each other out.
Yeah. So I want to ask this question that Grace Lee Boggs always asks.
Oh, yeah.
Right? What time is it on the clock of the world? And what is on your hearts this evening, like in this moment, as we sit in this moment? What time is it on the clock of the world, and what's on your hearts? She said no. Adrienne gets home court advantage. Ayana was like, nah.
It's like, nope.
I love the question, though.
I love this question. Well, this is one of my favorite things that Grace used to ask us. You would never go to Grace's house and like sit in her house, and she would not ask you, what time is it on the clock of the world? What time is it on the clock of the world? And every time I'm asked the question, a different thing comes. For me right now, it feels like we're in a birthing analogy. Contractions are happening. Motion is happening. The part of us that wants to move towards life is starting to drop down into a very dark portal. And it feels scary. And we don't know what's on the other side of the portal. And it feels like everything that has sustained us is like falling apart around us. And I think we're there, right? And I think that we want to be the mom, or we want to be somewhere else. Like we want to be the doctor, or we want to have a lot more control than we actually have right now. But I think part of it is like trusting that there is a portal and there is a way through. And that life, like babies know something about getting through and getting into the world. Like they as a doula, it's like, oh, the baby did something to help find its way out. The baby knows what time it is when it's time to come. The baby knows. So I'm like, some part of our species understands we've got to get through this portal, and some of us are paying attention. So we're the little fractal cells in the baby body that are like, there's life, there's something to move towards. And we might scream when we get there, but there's something on the other side. I think that's the large thing. What's on my heart, being in Detroit, in Michigan, is that I've been watching from afar the bravery of the movement here for Palestine. And I just want to say I love you all so much, everyone who's been participating in that and trying to figure out, we have to hold this line right now of saying no to genocide and saying no to fascism and saying no to MAGA and saying no to anything that's going to break the earth's heart and break our heart. And it's not clear all the ways to do that right now, but I appreciate the dignity of the stance that has emerged from this place. It's righteous, and it honors the grief, and it honors what's really happening in the world. And I know that it might feel very hard in this moment to be holding that stance, right? Because there's so much finger pointing and there's so much going on. But the genocide is happening, and it's not good for the earth, and it's not good for the future, and it's true. So that's on my heart. And then love is on my heart. Like, I do think love is part of the path. When I was reading, listening to you have these conversations, I was just like, the people who love the earth are going to keep finding each other and loving the earth that's in each other. And that's why when you and I met, it's like, of course, we're siblings in the work of our lives. And so I already love you, and I'm so grateful to see you shining so brightly. So just getting to be in your presence is, I'm geeked out.
So is everyone here. We're gonna do that. It's your turn, Dr. Ayana.
Man, this is truly just such a treat. I've been on a book tour for something like 54 days now, 20-something cities, and arriving in Detroit had like a very specific sweetness, because yes, we have been fangirling each other for years on the internet, and so like getting to have a conversation in person for the first time is exciting. And because I live in Maine now and I miss Black people. To be honest.
And I mean that.
I'm very Black in Maine, which is
Power to the people.
I'm trying, to hold it down for the state, but I'm not up to the task.
Did you know that Grace loved Maine?
No.
So Grace loved Maine, and she actually has a book called Conversations in Maine.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And every year, and I went a couple times, every year she and a couple people from Detroit would go over to Maine, to this
Okay.
island off the coast of Maine.
Which one?
That's a great question that
Okay.
I'm sure is in the book,
We'll
and I should
debrief.
know,
We'll
but
debrief
I'll
on
find
this.
it.
Yeah.
I'm at that perimenopausal state where that kind of thing is not available. But I went there,
Quickly.
and what we would do is we would bring all of our groceries on a boat and everything we needed for the week. And for her, it was always so important to have gin and tonics at 5 o'clock every night. You could do whatever you wanted to during the day.
Respect that.
But at 5
Yeah.
o'clock, you need to come together, have a gin and tonic.
Especially in the summer.
And talk about the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we would have been in that's the only time when you can jump in the ocean, and it's this is nice because it's cold.
It's cold. It's cold
Yes.
all year long.
But anyway, I thought you should know that Maine is a connective point.
And Maine has an incredible history of Blackness too. I mean, there were islands in Casco Bay, Maine, owned by Black people. The KKK was not a fan of that. Burned that shit to the ground. And there were beautiful, thriving interracial fishing communities in Maine 100 years ago. And so, Maine has an interesting history. For anyone who wants to know more about that, I learned about it through a podcast called 99 Years, which has the best. Samuel James is the host, and he has the most bass, mellifluous, anything he says is amazing, and he's a musician. And it's it's got a great tagline that I'm gonna blow if I try to recite it now, but it's something about I'm gonna blow it. It's something, it rhymes and it's charming, and maybe it'll come to me later. But to attempt to answer your question, I think the thought of the people who love the earth finding each other is really soothing. And at the same time, your birthing metaphor, I guess I don't have, it feels more hopeful than I am. I mean, this is a really hard time to be a human.
Your book is making me hopeful.
Which
so
is
sorry.
hilarious to me because
Listen, I wish my microphone ain't working, but I could talk loud. But literally in the book, toward the end, Ayana's fuck hope. She's
fuck hope, show me your strategy.
Yeah, I'm also a strategist, and I love
Implementation is
it.
the most sexy word. That's what you said, right?
Yes.
Implementation.
Yes.
I mean,
It's hot.
it's the policy wonk way of being show me the money. You
Yeah,
know?
I
What
love
are you
that.
actually doing? Swipe right on electricians. You know? How are we making this clean energy conversion, right? And so when I think of the birth metaphor, and especially in the moment of reproductive freedoms getting torn apart, I'm thinking this is going to be our nation's a very brutal birth and portal for our nation in a way
Yeah.
that I want to trust that the baby will come out okay and knows how to, but I'm just really unsure. And so when I think about what time it is on the clock of the world, I'm we've got 6 days, y'all.
Well, and it's true. Birth is coming up to the portal between life and death, and you never know if everyone's going to make it.
Yeah.
Right? And I think we're already in a place where the climate changes that are happening, it's everyone's not making it. Every
Yeah.
place is not making it. What is going to make it?
And
but that's
we thought
the
there
aspect.
were safe places
There's not.
that are demonstrably not that
No.
anymore. That's part of the reason I moved to Maine, Was if I was going to buy a house and a little bit of land, it made sense. But we'll see. And I think, I mean, I look at the graphs of like the difference between the one of two people are going to be the next president, and literally the graph of greenhouse gas emissions from our country wildly diverges depending on who we elect as president. Yeah. And that is a very crazy thing to see as a scientist who can cry looking at graphs. Because I know what that shit means for us, the people we care about, for the places we love. Like, what's gonna burn? What's gonna drown? You know?
Well, yeah, my book tour started in Asheville, in North Carolina, and people who were at the event are no longer with us, you know? And it's like fast, and you're up in the mountains, and you're homesteading, and you just know you're good because you're in the mountains, and we don't get hurricanes in the mountains in North Carolina. But I think that that's also part of it. Part of why I want to persist in the birth metaphor, I think, a little bit, is there's a way that something is already taking place, and we do have some choices, but there's something that's already happening. And as a doula, there's always a moment where the mother would look at me and be like, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm going to go home. I'm good. This is, whew. I thought I wanted to do it.
It was a cute experience. I think I've had enough.
I don't like it. And I feel like that is part of the feeling, right? Is there's some people who are like, if I stick my head in the sand or if I'm in denial, that'll be a way through. It's actually no. The parents who have the best births are the ones who are like, okay, let me come into reality with what is. What is the baby's not moving down. We have to pivot. The reality is the baby's got an umbilical cord around its neck. We've got to pivot. We have to be with what is, because that's the only thing that will make sure that life is the outcome here, if it's possible. Yeah. And I think that's where we align, is I'm just like, the pivots we need to make right now are dire and clear.
And holding that complexity, right, that you described, like between not supporting genocide and wanting to rebuff fascism at any cost, right? I mean, and that's been a particularly hard thing for me to deal with as a person with, a public intellectual.
You're such a public intellectual.
You are a luminary.
It's hilarious to me.
Both of you are.
To be, to say those words out loud, but like, I think in public. I'm thinking right now, I don't know what's gonna happen next. We're all in this moment together, but it's like, because people have so much trouble holding multiple things at once, the more I talk about other issues, the harder it is for people to hear my core message. Mm-hmm. And that is a trade-off that I grapple with. Yeah. Because of course I care about other people's lives, well-being, the health of the planet, the health of the ecosystems, right? But there's this like...
This retaliation, like, no, you stick to sports. You don't get to be social justice-y, Colin Kaepernick, LeBron James. You stick to, yeah.
And I mean, I do have the grace of like, my remit is planet Earth, so I mean, good luck telling me to stay in my lane.
Yeah, it's broad. Well, no, but I get what you're saying.
But still, right? Yeah. Like, stay out of geopolitics, right? Or like, you're saying this about the difference between these two candidates. You clearly don't care about Palestinians. And I'm like, what? Yeah. How could we jump to that conclusion that my heart is stone? You know? Anyway, I've just been thinking a lot about like how we can hold change, how we can like not cancel each other. All of your books.
And lovingly correct, right? Yes. Because you issued a loving correction.
And not even like correct, but just lovingly interact, you know? Yeah.
Well, and I think part of how I was reading your book was, I think of what we're doing, the loving correction as a course correction, right? That it's like, we've gotten off course as a species, and I think we've been off course for so long that we think this is our nature, right? That we're like, oh, we are capitalist, we are colonizers, we are constantly growing, we are addicted to plastic. We are that, you know? And we forget that there was a before, right? That there's
It
ways.
wasn't that long ago
And it wasn't
for the
that
plastic
long ago.
bit anyway.
No, it wasn't that long ago. We've been in this, but we've been moving off course, right? And so this idea of like, oh, we have to course correct to be in alignment with a future. And I wonder, well, you're in charge of the questions, but I mean, this is one that I
Orlando has the world's hardest job today.
I know, I'm like, sorry.
We really appreciate you.
Yes, but I do think that, you know, this idea of course correcting to the future, I keep getting stuck in the humility of the reality of like, oh, like even if you and I become the Beyonce and Rihanna of the world, of the ideal world.
Which one am I?
Do you smoke weed?
Occasionally.
Okay, so you're Beyonce and I'm Rihanna.
My question was going
Wait,
to be...
but are you Caribbean at all? Because like I'm half Jamaican, so I kind of want to lean Rihanna.
I mean,
We
I
could discuss
be
this
the
later.
Beyonce. Obviously, I don't mind. I do have a Virgo Sun, Scorpio Moon.
I'm
and
a little
from
more.
Texas.
I'm a little more uptight. I'll take Beyonce.
You know.
It's very controlled.
Yeah,
I'm very,
I feel like
yeah.
that. I feel like I'm like Rihanna. I'm like, girl, everything I read. Like it's, you know, we're gonna do it somehow, because we're here. So we're the ones who are gonna live through
But
this.
this is the collab the world needs, though. Also.
But that's what I was saying.
my
So even if we became like the mega stars of Idea Land, and people
Okay.
were all like, yes, climate,
go.
love, peace, da-da-da.
Yes.
Even still, we would only be able to impact so many people.
many.
The humility of it is like, it doesn't matter unless we get all of you with us, and then all of you go get like this many people with you, and so on and so forth. Like that humility that it's like, if you're not down for community and for organizing, then it doesn't matter how brilliant you are or what you think or how brilliant your vision for the future is. If you can't compel anyone else to join you in that walk, it doesn't matter. And so that's the thing for me, is always being like, okay, here's my best ideas, but does it mean anything to you? Does it change your life? If it's not changing your life, then I need to go back to the page, or I need to figure out, should I just be an herbalist or something else, you know? But it's like, how do we do something that's meaningful enough and also humble enough to be like, there's room here for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to go back to a point that you were making about how we ascribe identity to ourselves. And I want to go back to your formative years and talk about who raised you. I mean, both of you have, I think you guys...
A white mom and a black dad in both cases.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, which is interesting.
But you have an amazing story about learning from your dad and your book, and I get a glimpse of what your parents were like and how they had to fight for their love with the conversation between you and your sisters. Sort of take us back to, you know, those formative years. Who raised y'all? Because I want to know if they knew
Sounds like an
they were
indictment of our
raising
character. Who raised you?
luminaries.
Yeah, I mean, you were just talking about humility, and to me, like that's the through line with these questions. My parents were very humble, in some ways. My dad had a little bit of bravado. I mean, the double-buckled churches shoes and like the suits. He was an architect, you know. He had like impeccable style, and this sense of like, if it's worth doing well. Of course, you know, architecture is one of the most insular and racist fields. And so the like, you have to be twice as good to get half as much thing was always very clear to me. But it was also, you know, I had a very charmed childhood. There are a lot of people who are always like, but what's your trauma? When they hear my childhood story, I'm like,
my
actually,
gosh.
like, it was good. I'm so sorry to disappoint
so sorry
you.
that I don't have trauma narrative
I
for you.
like, you know, drew a lot of symmetrical abstract art. And, you know, hung out in my backyard playing with worms and digging up the tulip bulbs and like all that stuff. In a rough neighborhood in New York City, which is now perhaps the biggest gentrification swing, Fort Greene. And so, but my little tiny world with me and my parents, I'm an only child. I have a half sister who's 18 years older, so she never lived, I never lived with her. It was safe and creative and encouraging, and the only thing my parents were super clear about was you gotta put in some effort. Like, cute, you have these natural abilities, like so does basically everyone, and you have to give back. And what I'm so grateful for is they made that wide open. Because you can contribute to society, to community, to justice in innumerable ways. And so they were just like, to whom much is given, much is expected. You have to give back, but you can decide how. My mother, however, was a high school English teacher for 37 years before she retired and became a farmer.
Right, she's homesteading.
Yeah, permaculture, homestead farmer. She just moved in with me and we got chickens and she's plowed up the entire lawn.
You got chickens?
10 chickens, and the lawn has been literally like plowed up. There's seaweed being put in there to rehabilitate the topsoil, and like who knows what sort of hopefully wildflower meadow will emerge at the end of this, or vegetable garden. But it was, you know, from her, the sort of like books are so important to how we see the world, to how we understand people from different places. And also this sense of, like, you just keep showing up from both of them. You just keep doing the thing. And the phrase that's coming up for me over and over again, which I'm like, where in my recesses of my brain did this come from, is Martin Luther King saying, I may not get there with you. And it's not a savior thing, because the thing that actually keeps me going in this work is knowing the humility of like, I cannot save the planet. It is impossible for me as a single person to do that. I haven't even tried, because I'm just like, let me do my little thing and try to make some ripples, right? But this, I may not get there with you, actually takes a lot of pressure off, right? Because it's like you do your part, and this is the work of generations, and you contribute to it, and you try to bring as many people along with you as you can, and frame your work. And I now see myself, my primary role in the environmental movement is as welcomer. Like, come on in, we need you, you're welcome, whatever you have to bring, your skills, your resources, your networks, we desperately need that in the mix. So like, you know, get in where you fit in and let's get this done.
Yeah. Adrienne, when your parents got together, was it a crime? No.
Almost.
Almost? Okay.
It had been legal, I think, for a decade
Okay.
when they fell in love. My dad made eyes at my mom in a library. She was studying with a white boy, and 3 months later they were married. And
That's what I'm talking about. Y'all talking about talking, we be talking for 3 years.
listen,
Get on with it.
Listen, it was like, you is, or is you ain't,
Yeah,
because
right.
I'm trying to have some babies. And my mom, you know, my dad is a strategist, and my mom is an organizer. But neither of them really were that. Like my dad went into the military, and so he was a strategist, but within a very limited context. Military strategy is very antiquated in a lot of ways. He was the chief of war plans for the U.S. Army when 9/11 happened. My mom is an organizer at heart, and she's always like, you know, just after Hurricane Helene, my grandmother, several uncles, and one of my dad's aunts, my dad's sisters, everyone was like displaced and evacuated and power out and all this. My mom's just been driving South Carolina, North Carolina, all over the place, taking supplies and doing all this stuff like that. Her spirit is organizer. But in the military, it was like organizing military families and stuff like that. And I grew up moving every 2 to 3 years to a new place, often in Germany, where everyone was mixed, but mixed with different things. So it was like a lot of Black and Koreans, a lot of Black and Japs. That's what they would say. And then a lot of Black and white, and black. Everybody was like, anywhere you go in the world, they want to have sex with Black people. And the military allows that to happen. So these were conversations when I was younger. It's so weird to like try
I
to.
mean, just call it like it is. You
Yeah,
know?
I mean, it's really weird to go back and be like,
I
well, you
have
asked
lost
me.
control of this conversation.
This is where
Somebody
I grew up.
help me.
The reason I think it's important to name this, right, is because I grew up in an environment where all these people who were like, you're my enemy, but you're also the father of my children, or you're my enemy, but we're building family together, and we met because of war, but now we're together and we're building family. So the norm for my life was all these situations that were like, we're an impossible story, we're an unlikely story, we're, like we're a mixed race family from the deep south. My parents both were like, we're not allowed to look at each other, and then they did. So I always say that I was born into impossible love story, and I was surrounded by other people who also had been born into impossible love stories. And then in that mix, and then we would create our own language for each other, like calling each other mutts, calling each other mulattoes, like all kinds of stuff. We made culture that was like okay for mixedness. And then growing up, then I started to come into a much more binary world. And it's always been so interesting to me to try to navigate this binary space when I know something else also coexists and is happening already. And almost everyone I know, whether the mix is direct, where you're like, oh, these two opposites, I think everyone comes from mixing of cultures, mixing of religions, mixing of something, but we tell these stories about ourselves as if that's not the case. So I grew up in that, and then I grew up really supported by my parents to be curious and experimental. Yeah. My mom also was the one who was like, reading is so important. Khalil Gibran was like a formative text that she would read us when we were younger, the prophet. And even though we grew up inside of a sort of Christian religious space, a lot of the ideas now when I look are more Buddhist and more Taoist and other things. And that was because they were reading and learning, they were really interested in what's different from what we learned in the South. And as I was listening to you, I was like, my work also feels like when you were talking about that, like you commit wholly to the work and you really let go of, controlling the outcome and saying like, I'm going to just do this. I'm proud of you that you never thought you were going to save the world. I definitely thought I was doing it for a while. And I had to learn, emergent strategy really was when I was like, humble yourself. You're a fractal, but everyone else is a fractal too. Shape change,
This is so funny because my parents' story is like their best friends were dating, and my dad was like, I want to meet who my friend's dating. And so they had like a double date at his apartment in Brooklyn, and there was like a lot of white rum and a lot of reggae, and it was like the mid-'60s. And my mom was like, Jamaican culture seems fun.
I mean, she's not wrong.
She's not wrong, right? And so it was like a very much like in the melting pot of like Brooklyn in the 60s. But I was not raised around a lot of interracial folks. I was the weirdo. Yeah, I was the one whose parents had jungle fever, right?
Yeah. Oh, no, I mean, we did get,
Yeah.
it's like, that wasn't like, but it was like everyone has parents. All these other people's parents had jungle fever too.
Yeah.
When I landed, at one point my parents were stationed
So
in
we're
Georgia.
leaning into this conversation because it's one that we've actually wanted
We've
to
been
have.
really wanting.
This,
I'm like,
this,
yeah, and then what did you have?
The question is like, is there a special role for mixed people in this moment?
Well, I think I love this question because
Like, can we be
let's get in the
helpful?
book.
Not in
Yeah.
like a.
But let's get in the
Yeah.
book. And Adrienne, you specifically named this in the book about both sides of your ancestry and you having both sets of blood, right? And carrying that tension of responsibility and the nuance that comes with having both sides.
It's so important.
But you also named the privilege that you have.
Absolutely.
Right? And so is that the role, to understand the privilege that you have and leverage it?
I think that there's a couple of things, because not all multiracial people have privilege, right? And so I think one of the things is you can never have the conversation as if class doesn't exist or isn't there. My parents were a mixed class relationship as well. My dad came from poverty and my mom came from a middle class family that had gone towards the upper echelons and then kept falling back from it. And so I was raised with this access, and then my dad became an officer in the military, where if you're an officer, even though you don't make more money, you get trained. I see some folks nodding, they're like, oh, I know. You're the officer's kid. You live in a different kind of housing, and you learn how to do all the forks and all that stuff, right? Like you learn how to have a formal meal and how to host things. But so the privilege that I have now as an adult feels like a different thing, where I'm like, oh, like the imprint of having a white mother creates a different familiarity when I'm talking to white people, especially wealthy white people. There's a way that they can read and understand me that I didn't understand. For a long time, I was just like, I don't know. They just listen to me. I don't know. And, you know, just having to really take ownership of like, oh, there's something that I can't necessarily see in myself that they recognize and they feel familiar with. And sometimes we'll make them sloppy or slippery, right? We're like, oh, I can get away with this with you. Yeah. And then there's a way with blackness and with black community that I've also had to be like, okay, like I'm always trying to figure out how to take up as much space as I can as a black woman and as little as I can as a mixed race woman, if that makes sense. So I'm always like, the responsibility of all black people, I think, in the world is to take up as much space as possible because we are recovering from genocide. We are repopulating, we are reclaiming culture. We are making something on the other side of a portal, right? Like slavery was a portal. Slavery was an impossible situation. There's no way we were gonna survive, but here we are. There's ancestors that I'm sure thought that was the end, but here we are. So there's something about taking up as much space as we can and saying we have visions of our existence and ourselves in the future. That's very important. But then when I am uplifting people, I'm always looking to how do I uplift people whose black experience is even blacker than mine? How do I point to an Alexis DeVoe? How do I point to an Audre Lorde? How do I point to people who didn't have a white parent, didn't have that shaping, and are the visionaries that I look to, right? So I think there is that both and, but I also think there's something that has been uncomfortable to sit with, where it's like, I can't leave my white family behind in ignorance. And it feels, I'd love to. I've tried, I've been like, you know what, y'all are voting for Trump and I just can't talk to you for a while. And I'm like, oh, if I'm not talking to you, there's no one else who thinks like me in your entire world. And that means that no one is piercing through the news blanket that is over you, that is full of misinformation and misdirection. It's amazing to me how many times I'll go have conversations with my family and be like, that's what you think happened? Because that's not what happened. And there's information on like what did happen, but I think we leave people behind. And I think for good reason, we're like, I can just leave you behind. But I think so much of where our work collides and combines is this idea that like we have to be welcoming as many people as we can, no matter what they've been up to, into this path to the future. And we have to say the cost is to learn some things about yourself and your role in this world, right? Yeah. And so if you're a white man, there's some things you're gonna have to learn to be a part of a future and not dragging us back to the past. And the same is true for ourselves, right? It's like, oh, for me as a mixed race woman now who I can fly up to Detroit or I can go places. And my parents, you know, I wonder about this for you too. Like my parents, I think you talk about this to your dad in the book and like wondering if he was respected in his field and like not understanding the impact he was having and then being like, oh no, like this is actually a really successful story of a black man making it, right? Yeah. And I feel similar, like I look at my life, my parents' life, and for so long I've been so critical of them and just like, how could you join the military? How could you do this? But I'm like, oh, can I have even the humility of being like, where were you and how far have you come? And you had 3 kids who are all doing variations of work that is giving back to community and giving back to people and trying to help make things better, who are all stable. You know, like we can all take care of ourselves and give back to our parents as well. And there is that sense of intergenerational like solidity. Like the goal for our family has never been like wealth. It's always been like get solid and then take care of others. And even that feels like, oh, what would it look like to be in a country where that was the orientation, you know?
Yeah. I want to talk about the books because that's why we're here. We've been having a good conversation though.
We're always talking about the books.
We're always. But, you know, I guess my question is, what had been missing from the discourse and the zeitgeist that served as the impetus for What If We Get It Right and Loving Corrections? Ayana, I'll start with you.
It's funny because like I'm still thinking about what you just said about and like the loving corrections. I'm like, man, do I have to go talk to my white relatives? Do I
Yes,
have to?
but we'll talk about it.
We'll talk
Because
about
there's
it.
ways.
We'll talk about it.
It's not like all at once. You know.
Because I'm going to briefly on your book and then on mine. What I see as what was missing is literally that mix of loving and corrections, and just having this understanding of like the role for each of us in like where that is appropriate, right? Like in the same way that you and I have certain like training and access and the fancy resume and the schools and whatever, and the seeing these white people like who are like, what are they doing? You're like, oh, that could very easily be my cousin. So let me just like reframe, right? It is my cousin. And so has such a huge role to play also in environmental work, because we are now at the point where most people are like, oh, we're really screwing up the planet. Climate change is serious. The ways that we're destroying ecosystems and producing all this waste are serious problems. And yet we so resist any sort of correction to our behavior, even when it would be us doing the self-correction. Like the number of people who come up to me with guilt. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. You already know what the right thing to do is. Like, this is a confessional. Like, just go do the thing. Like, I don't need to tell you. Like, there's no amount of like rosaries that will like get you where you need to go. Just do the thing, you know? I'm sure I have like so many generations of like Irish Catholic guilt.
Oh my God! We've lost her.
Between the Irish and the Jamaican, like you can only imagine. But
they do sound similar.
I know. There's a good lilt to it all. But the opportunity there is also to like lovingly correct ourselves and lead by example in how we approach all of these complex issues. So for me, this conversation that is not going as you planned is actually the perfect segue into answering this question, because I was like, if I'm going to write a climate book, which I have somehow signed a book deal to commit to writing and I've spent the money, so I have to do. What does the world actually need a climate book?
Yes.
And if I'm going to do this, how can I make an offering that would otherwise not be made? Like, what is the perspective that I can bring to this that is not already covered, right? Like, we don't actually need another book of bad news. We don't actually need another technical book. We certainly don't need another, like, technology will save us book. And so I wrote this. Every round of edits was, how do I put more of myself into this book, which is not as a trained scientist, is not how I would approach this normally. But I realized, like, the more personality I put into it, the more sassy footnotes I add to it, the playlists, the art, the quotes. This is, like, low-key the blackest climate book. It is Audre Lorde, it is Maya Angelou, it is Adrienne Maree Brown as the people who are quoted in this book.
That was my
right?
answer. A reporter asked me, why did you choose this book out of all the climate books?
It's the
that
blackest.
came out? I was like, it's black. She black. Honest to God, I'm
I
quoted.
love that.
Yeah.
And so there's a sense of like, a girl raised in 80s and 90s Brooklyn is writing a climate book. Yeah. What is that climate book, right? Who like has all of the formal academic training, but also like desperately wants to welcome people in. And so in order to do that, I had to put as much of myself into the book as possible, which is not my normal
And
MO.
you did so beautifully.
Thank
You did. I got a time list because we're running short on time, and I know Claire
But the
is
one
probably
sentence answer to the question
Yeah.
is there wasn't enough of talk about solutions. It was
Yeah.
all apocalypse, no what if we get it right.
Yeah, and that was what was so, I think, brilliant about your book is that you made certain that we understood what the problems were, right? And
It's
they
a
are
three-page
bleak.
summary of all the bad news. Yeah.
But then you talk about, the possibilities. I want to come back to that because that's going to be our final question, and then we're going to come to you all. Adrienne, same
Yes,
question.
yes.
Loving corrections. Like what was missing? And I guess I'll layer on top of that question. For correction, I think we love to correct without the love first.
Oh, yeah,
right?
love.
Is love required before you seek to correct? Right.
It depends what you're correcting. It depends the relationship. So just one sentence before I hop into that on your book, because I've been listening to it and I've been feeling so hopeless and so sad. Like I actually, on my podcast recently with my sister, I was like, I'm sad, Adrienne, now. Like, I've always been happy, Adrienne. I've always been joyful and positive, Adrienne, and I'm so heartbroken right now. Hurricane Helene hitting after this year of genocide and watching how obliterating it was, I was heartbroken. And I needed this. I needed it to not just be you, but all these other people who are like, I can see from this side what we can do, and I can see from this side. It's just so brilliant. And I'm so tired of one person talking at me. I'm trying to I'm like, I want a conversation all the time. So I just want to say, when I saw that when you started announcing, I was like, thank God this book is coming. I need it so bad, and then the timing is just right. So loving
The collective wisdom is the moment.
It is
what we need. Yeah.
That's what we need, right? And the idea that like none of us has the answer, but all of us have part of the answer. And for me, the loving corrections piece is like, when I did my facilitation work, which for 25 years, that was my primary thing, was being like, I'm physically holding the space for movement workers, environmentalists, folks to come together, vision, change, conflict, all this stuff. And the feedback I would get was like, the thing I was good at was this little dragon loving move where I'd be like, oh, nope, we're not doing that. Oh, no, we're not gonna do that. You're just gonna come over this way and let me get you back on track because you just said something that now takes us away from what we're here to do. And it was always very clear to me that like this group is here to do a particular thing. They might not even know quite what it is yet, but I can feel it. I can feel what they're here to do, and that's not it. And so I was trying to figure out in this book, I was like, okay, I keep finding these things emerge that are that kind of move that I want to do, but I'm not a facilitator anymore. How do I do this move? I'm going to write it as an essay. I'm going to write a letter to men, and it's going to...
I'm like...
We're going directly to the main problem. We're like, let's start at the beginning. In the beginning was the man, and and
in the end was the matriarchy.
You know I don't think that. Anyway, but so I had this feeling of like, what is it like to write it, and can I facilitate from the page? And what I keep finding is that the discourse in the social media realm, right? So I was politicized before social media by people who loved me enough to sit down and be like, no, baby girl, that's not it. That's not even any close to it. Let me have you read some Bell Hooks, and let me have you read some Angela Davis. And do you know about communism? Do you know about socialism? Do you know, like there's just whole other ways of thinking. I had people love me to wisdom. And however wise I am now, it's because someone loved me, and then someone else loved me, and someone else loved me. So the book for me is trying to do that, to be like, I know a lot of y'all are getting politicized on TikTok, and you think that discourse means yelling at someone in a comment and reducing them to something you can't understand and taking the thing and twisting it, and it's all bots and trolls and comment farmers anyway. Let me speak to you like a person who loves you and wants you to get together because I need you to come join our movement. And I love that you said your job is welcome, because I think of that too. That I'm like, I was like, movement, y'all keep doing movement. And I'm gonna try to go get more people to wanna be part of it, right? And show you like there is a way to be in it and to stay in it, and then learning how to fight. Everyone's so mad at each other, and we actually do have some really important battles that we need to have. Like, we have things that can no longer continue, but they will only stop if each of us in our private lives, when we're at a kitchen table, when we're in our lover's bed, when we're, in spaces with our friends, it's only going to happen if people in those private spaces are like, I'm willing to have a good, loving fight with you. Let's hold
That's
hands
what I'm worried
and
about.
battle.
This is what I was actually thinking when you asked your first question. Like, on the clock of the world, I feel like we're tired. We're so tired. Like, we've been fighting and fighting and
We're so
fighting,
tired.
right? Like, I saw our friend Dream Hampton post on Instagram the other day, like, the human body was not made to withstand 3 Trump candidacies.
I agree.
Like, it's just too much, like, hate to fight, all these different fronts to fight. And so, like, there's a part of me that, like, I do feel like both of our books are a useful offering in this moment. I believe that. But at the same time, I'm like, how can we be expected to have the resilience and bandwidth for these conversations that require a significant amount of energy and devotion and care?
Well, and this is why relationship matters. Because I'm like, I'm not trying to have the one-time conversation with you and make it. I'm like, my grandmother.
I'm going to Atlanta to do some door knocking. It's going to be awkward, but whatever, we'll see.
But door knocking is different, right? Because you're like, I don't know you. I am coming to manipulate you basically to do what I want you to do. And yay, right? I love that aspect of organizing. No, I want to be like, I need to get you there. But I do feel like relationship is actually the thing. And that's also what keeps us from being too tired. So like, I have people in my life who are like, Adrienne, I see what you've been doing over this past year, and you look tired and you sound tired and you sound heartbroken. So I need you. So I have friends who are now like, you're not allowed to be on social media for more than this much each day. Really minimize what you put out. You've already given enough into this conversation about this right now. There's nothing else you're gonna say in the next 4 days that's gonna like, just rest. And the same thing I'm saying to you. You just have toured. You've given us this huge,
4 more
huge
days,
gift.
all in.
And I'm telling you what shows you're going to watch when you're binging.
I know, she's giving me some
in bed.
trashy TV recommendations.
Okay, I can't
Hibernation
wait.
winter.
Let me come in and say that
Orlando.
sing that I think something your sister said, Adrienne, that I think rings true, that even though you're tired and exhausted, she said something that I so recognize in you, that you still have the wonder of the world in your eyes.
I'm in love with it.
That energy, right? And so that leads me to our final question, and then we're going to have a little bit of audience interaction. And I want to read it because I want to get it right. Ayana, your book, What If We Get It Right? You ask, what if we act as if we love the future? Adrienne, you ask, what does it look like to imagine a future where we all get to be here, not causing harm to each other? Of course, there are other entire sections of both of your books unpacking these questions in greater detail. So everybody, make sure you get the book if you haven't already. But if you could share just a few thoughts here to whet our appetites. What does getting it right in relationship and in loving correction, getting it right for our climate future, right? What does that look like? And then we'll have our audience interaction. Ayana, you look like you turned into something. So are we gonna get to hear you read something?
Well, I was just thinking, there's some things that you write and you're like, I think I put it best when I had the time to think through the words. So my answer to this question is the last chapter of the book. It's called Away from the Brink, which at one point was the title for the whole book. After it was, What Do We Become? How Humans Survive Humanity, which probably would not have been a New York Times bestseller, but
No, but I love that.
But that's the real title.
That is so good, though. We need like a T-shirt or something of that.
I feel like that's the book we write together.
Oh my God. Okay.
We were going to have such a chill 2025.
You heard it here first.
I'm like, oh my God, I'm so excited to write that book with you. Okay.
I see my colleague Jenna Brooker in the room. She's gonna break this story.
They've
We're gonna break
committed.
it.
I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm in. Okay, but read
Okay,
yours.
I'm going to
read your
give you
words.
a few little tidbits from this. If we get it right, the world is a lot more green, more full of life. If we get it right, the combustion phase of humanity is over. If we get it right, we have relocalized and we eat well. If we get it right, our homes are comfortable, the future is not drafty. If we get it right, there is no traffic in cities because there are so few cars in cities. There is a sailboat renaissance. If we get it right, coastlines are greener too. And the tyranny of the minority is over. The climate-concerned majority rules. As both climate and technological change remake our world, we instituted a universal basic income. If we get it right, there are fewer desk jobs. Electricians do very well on dating apps.
And get paid like basketball players.
They already do. It's very lucrative, the trades, y'all. Don't sleep on this. If we get it right, the pace of life is more humane. Biophilia and biomimicry flourish in a virtuous cycle with the thriving of biodiversity. If we get it right, culture has caught up with our climate reality. Design is planet-centric, not human-centered. If we get it right, even with all these changes, the world and our homes are still familiar. It's the invisible systems that undergird our lives, our energy, food, and transit systems, our methods of engineering, manufacturing, and building, and the policies that organize it all that have been overhauled. Regreening the world and rerouting in communities feels good. There's more collaboration, more knowing and being known, more sweetness. We lean into trial and error, into replication more than scaling. The world is a mashup of traditional and high-tech, old ways made new. The extractive fossil fuel economy is out. The renewable, regenerative economy is in. Humanity has backed off, made more room for other species, learned to share this magnificent planet. Our surroundings are verdant. Spring is not silent, it's cacophonous. We are putting the pieces back together, adapting to the climate-changed world with eyes and hearts open wide. We embrace possibility, continually moving away from the brink and toward answers to the grand question, what if we get it right?
I was like,
Adrienne, what about you?
I've figured out how we're going to write the book. I think we're going to do a series of conversations and just record them and transcribe them. It's going to be dumb. Okay, so the conclusion of my book, the closing of it, is From Fragility to Fortitude. And this occurred to me when I was facilitating the first emergent strategy gatherings, actually here in Detroit. I did a series of immersions. And was anyone there? Yay. Hi. So we did these things. You're like, yeah. So we did these immersions. It was very experimental. And one of the things I noticed is when people in movement were getting together, more and more what was happening was we were exposing our fragility. And the fragility looked like what Barbara Smith has talked about is we ran with the identity and dropped the politics. Like we were really showing up and being like, here's who I am and here's how you need to orient towards me, but not here's who we are and here's what we need in order to be with each other. And so I was like, how do we move from fragility to fortitude? And I always think that movement should be this sanctuary and this practice ground where people are like, oh, I want to be a part of the future, and movement is a place where I can experience what that would be like, and movement is a place where I can be in this practice with other people. But that's not what movement has been, right? In this period, it's been really divisive. You know, the Trump trickle-down effect, I think, of this Trump time has been this aggressive, divisive energy. So I think so much of what we're, at the global level and at the interpersonal level and at the internal level, moving from fragility to fortitude in all of our relationships. That it's like this thing between us is not going to be broken because you say the wrong word. It's not going to be broken because you misunderstand me. It's not going to be broken even if we have a serious difference of opinion. We can hold on to each other and we can keep moving forward together. And I think we can get there, but I think it's a lot of people have to change a bit. And I think sometimes that's even harder than like, you know, a few people changing everything. You know, I'm like, I think that's what happens right now is like some people are like, I care about the environment, so me by myself, I'm gonna get off the grid and do all this very extreme stuff. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm glad you're that kind of person. But most people are not gonna do that until they're forced into those conditions. You know, right now in Asheville, people are like, oh, we are living like that, off the grid and with each other. And some people are like, it's kind of amazing what's happening between us. But for most people, I think what you said, it's like, I love that you said the invisible systems underneath. Like if the systems that hold us become just, become liberatory, become decolonized, then we can make this like just transition. And for most people, it'll be like, oh, it's just normal that I carry my cup and then I take the bus and then I do these things because it's easier for me to do that. That's the easier way to exist. And I love that there are places where that move is already happening from fragility to fortitude. I do see it. In this electoral cycle, getting off of social media has actually been so helpful because I'm like, oh, real people who organize lots and lots of people are actually very aligned on what to do right now. It's online where people are like, no, we can't hold this different. I'm like, everyone else I talk to is like, vote for who you're going to vote for. If you're organizing people, the mass movement needs to block MAGA and block fascism. And if you're doing this, do this. It's like, it's not actually something we have to fight over in that way. We're all trying to do a similar thing. I think one of the things to remember from history about moving from fragility to fortitude, because it's a cycle, is in the past, it's only been the divergent efforts of each movement, the ones that seem to not be aligned, all converging at the same time. That is like some people have to be doing the large actions. Some people have to be inside talking to the bureaucrats. Some people have to be moving the money. Some people have to be holding the money accountable. Some people have to be making changes in their homes.
You know,
like
that's why I got a PhD in science.
That's why?
Because I wanted to do environmental policy, and the lawyers were doing it from their end, but the scientists were like, I'm not going to wear a suit and go talk to those people.
You're like,
and I was
okay,
like,
well, guess what
I
I'll
actually
do.
like to dress up. I'm in.
Yes.
I can be
right?
helpful, yeah.
This idea of like, oh, if you find your role and you let other people find their role and you respect the fact that it's like, oh, that's how you're doing it. This is how I'm doing it. And in history, it takes all of these things that look like different strategies, but the timing has to converge. And I think we're in that moment right now where it's like, oh, even the issues we're working on, they're siloed in such a way it makes it seem like climate is something other than not genocide. It's not. Do you know what the end of climate catastrophe is? We all dead. Hello? So we're all on the same thing, right? We're trying to be alive until the sun blows up. And so, like, I think we can do better than we're doing now. And fortitude.
Adrienne Maree Brown, Ayana Elizabeth Johnson.
Orlando.
Until the sun blows up.
Until the sun blows up. It is going to blow up.
So,
That's what someone's already...
Everybody, you should have these in your chairs. You get a diagram from the What If We Get It Right, and you get the climate oath. I think I'm going to try to have Ayana read it a little later on. Okay, so the preparation that we did for this is I asked Ayana and Adrienne to sort of prepare in their hearts questions that they want to ask y'all. Right, if you are daring enough to raise your hand to answer the question, because, you know, we do the Q&A thing a lot, right, and it could get a little stale. But how do you feel about fielding a question from the Adrienne Maree Brown and the Dr. Ayana Elizabeth Johnson, right? Okay, and so I'm going to get my Phil Donahue, Oprah Winfrey on and come down.
Yes, sir. Wait, walk, though. Give the walk. Oprah had a walk. There we go. No, there we go. That's good. That's good.
But like maybe a little jauntier.
Oh, swag. I saw the swag come over you. You can't hide
Listen,
it.
because, you know, the East Side resides in
Exactly.
me. 247. Okay. So I'm going to punt to Adrienne. You go first.
So I get to ask the question, then someone will raise their hand after?
Yeah.
So I want to ask some brave person to share with me, what's keeping you from having the loving correction conversation you know you need to have?
That's so good. That's so good. Okay, come on up. Come on up. You don't get a car.
You get a
And
EV.
I'm holding
Got
on
like
to the mic.
a
Don't
bus
try-
pass.
It's my microphone. Okay.
Oh yeah, bus pass.
What's
You
your
get a
name?
bus pass.
I'm Lance Wheeler.
Hi,
I work
Lance.
at the Wright Museum. I'm the new VP of Learning
You
Engagement.
better work at the Wright Museum. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm new to Detroit. I've been here for 3 months, so I'm happy to be here in this space.
Welcome
with you all.
home.
Thank you. For me, I'm tired. You know, constantly defending, constantly being that level of vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I've decided to put a wall up and say, enough is enough. I'm tired. Figure that shit out on your own. And I do this work every day. And so some days I just want to come home and just be Lance. Plain and simple.
That resonates. Do I get to respond to that?
Yes, respond.
I think that what you said, that resonates. Like, I think exhaustion is kind of the shared collective state right now. And everyone's exhausted for different reasons, including, like, there's the collective reasons, and then there's only so much grief we can hold to. What's the Buddhist? My Buddhist friend. Angel Kyoto Williams. I was like,
Reverend.
I have a Buddhist black friend. Y'all, perimenopause is like not a game. It's just like your brain is just like, no, girl, you can't have it. Anyway, one of the things she said was that our technology has developed faster than our spiritual capacity to hold what we know. And that, I think about that all the time, that I'm just like, oh, like we're tired because we're literally seeing and experiencing more things than we can hold. And then people in our lives are like front lines as well. So do you want to hear advice on that? Because the thing that's been helping me is to acknowledge the exhaustion with the person that I love. And to say, like, when you say this thing, it hurts me, and I'm so tired that I can't even deal with you with it. And it's making me more tired, like having to watch or feel or be impacted by it. And I want to ask you if you could hold this as a boundary, you know? If you're not ready to work on it, can you at least hold the boundary of not fucking up in front of my face? Do you know what I mean? Like, literally, I need that. And at some point, maybe I'll have more energy. Because that idea of, like, taking the boundary, you know, I have people that I've held long boundaries with. And my friend Prentice Hemphill says, boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and myself simultaneously.
That's good.
It's so good, right? So that idea of being like, what I need to protect me as an exhausted person is a boundary from this thing. And I'd love if there was a correction available, or if you could reach it on your own. One of the things I hope people do with this book is take the essay that I'm like, I did it for you. You don't have to articulate it. I already wrote it. So all you have to do is hand the essay to someone and be like, can you just read this? This is how you make me feel. Can we talk about it? You read it, sit with it for a week.
Just want to
Sit
say
with it
to
for
all the
2.
women in the audience who are having trouble finding people who are clear on various things. Her opening essay,
The opening is
loving corrections
all my
to
friends,
men,
especially the ones who date cis
pass
men.
it around.
Yeah, because I was
Yeah.
like, you guys could be gay, but since
If
you
there
wanted,
was a pill, we would eat it.
yes, I mean, but you know, I will just say this too. I love men. I date one. He's in my polycule, but I feel like there's so many lonely men and so many lonely women and so many lonely people out there, and so many tired, lonely people who are like, do you know how hard the world is? I need to come here and have it just be peace. And fake peace, or like living on either side of a wall, is not actually peace, right? We know what walls do, you know? So that idea of being like, can you come to my side of the wall and just look at it with me? Do you see how tired I am? Read this essay and let's talk in a couple weeks.
Dr. Ayana, your question.
I just wanted to read a short quote from E.O. Wilson that is a different version of that, which is, who is, for those who don't know him, he was an incredible biologist. He was like in love with ants as a kid, became like a world-class entomologist.
Really?
Oh yeah. And like really taught us a lot about biophilia. This term about this innate love we have for the planet is popularized by him.
I love that.
And he wrote, the real problem of humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. And it is terrifically dangerous, and it is now approaching a point of crisis overall. And that's how I introduced
Yes.
the artificial intelligence chapter of my book.
Oh, yes.
So yes, I mean,
exciting.
there are biologists thinking about this,
Exactly.
saying like, what are we built for? How
Yeah.
much can we handle? I love to say like, I can't have a good version of that conversation right now.
That's right.
It'll be better for everyone if we just put a pin in that.
Let me sleep on it.
So, or like, I'll come back to you in a season, you know?
Listen, I find
need
a
more
decade,
than one night
a
of
decade
sleep.
is a really nice time to get over something.
My question to you is the title question of the book. I mean, I'm curious for people who are making a way, making change here in Detroit. I had the chance to meet a bunch of folks earlier this evening who are deeply in that work. Are there glimmers that you see that you're excited about of what getting it right looks like here? Yes. We've got a
Y'all
wink
too.
and a nod.
I hold it.
Oh, yeah. Oprah style. Oprah wasn't giving up the microphone.
So I completely understand and empathize with being exhausted and tired. I've watched Iron Man twice in the past week,
Wow.
and he's sitting down in his place. He's like, you know, I've been through worse, because he's still got the palladium in his chest and it's killing him. And just because you've been through worse, he's like, you know, talking to Pepper and, no, he's talking to Black Widow. Yeah. And I've been through worse, but I'm tired. I'm exhausted. So he's giving away his art collection and Pepper's going crazy. He's acting a fool in front of, like, you know, patrons and philanthropists and stuff. And he's mourning again, going through grief about his dad. My dad never told me he loved me, da-da-da-da-da. So he's got this video planned, and he's probably never, ever seen it all the way through. At this point in time, he's found a possible solution to save his own life. And he has new inspired motivation and inspiration, because at the end of that 8mm, his dad is like, my greatest creation has always been you. And there's a hint of a smile. That guy was an arms dealer, military defense scientist. That is not easy work. So you have to find inspiration and motivation new. It has to be birthed, and you will be screaming through the way. But there's light at the end of the tunnel. Just keep going.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else want to answer Ayana's question?
These two are like, they can't figure out who. I think they both wanted so much. But if I had to vote, the one in yellow.
Okay,
the
so
hat. The hat.
Mama,
I want to hear what that hat has
come
to
here,
say.
Mama Myrtle. This Mama Myrtle from Feed 'em
Exactly.
Freedom. I didn't
Oh, I
even
know
realize that was
exactly
her.
who it is.
I know you know who it is, Adrienne. I didn't even see. Stand up. Come on out.
This is what if we get it right.
This is it.
This is what if we get it. This is embodied what if we get it right and loving correction.
Don't act all shy.
I am very shy.
I'm crying.
Oh, me too.
I
I've
love
been
you
sitting
so
in-
much.
I love you too. And I've been sitting in that seat, and everything just resonates. The tired, the guilt. I have grandchildren, and you do look one of my grandchildren.
I doula. She was one of my first babies that came into this world.
So if we get it right, I don't have to worry about those grandchildren.
That's right.
We will kick that addiction to plastic.
That's right.
I have a daughter who gets very, very cold. And as an old lady, I worry about how she's going to stay warm.
Yeah.
So if we get it right, I won't have to worry. There are millions of us, and we all have a piece. And if we get it right, we're going to mix it all up, and we're going to get it right.
Do you know who Mama Myrtle is? Have you heard of Feed 'em Freedom
You know
Farms?
Feed of Freedom?
I've been doing the work through urban agriculture, and I follow in the footsteps of some folks in this room doing urban agriculture. I see y'all over there. And educating, working with young people over and over again. It never stops. And it keeps, the garden is a space where it's not warm and all fluffy. It's a place of work, and it's a place where we learn and we grow. We grow our souls. That's, we look at what time it is on the clock of the world. And I'm overtaken, so y'all making me feel really special. I'm glad John drugged me out the house. This is one of the young people who is changing Detroit as we speak with Sanctuary Farms. So, while we talk about Feed 'em Freedom and what we're growing over there on Manistee, I also think about all these other folks who have touched me and who I get to touch. So, all power to the people.
That's Mama Myrtle, y'all. I'm making my way back to the stage, and we want to end with, Adrienne, you're emotional. Why are you emotional?
I left Detroit in 2021 for Durham, and I miss y'all. And I'm just reminded of how thick Detroit is with teachers, and how thick Detroit is with practitioners, and how brilliant Detroit is at making a way of no way, and how Detroit taught me you're nobody unless you're somebody to other somebodies, James Boggs, you know. So I just feel emotional because Mama Myrtle, that's the dream, you know, that's the dream I also share with you. Like, and that, it makes it so personal. It's like intergenerational is not theoretical. It's like people we actually love now. And even when we're tired, you know, that kind of love gets us through. Because giving birth, you get exhausted. No matter what role you're playing, if you're the doula, if you're the mama, if you're the baby, if you're the doctor, it's tiring. But there is something about but it's a miracle that we're talking about. And let's not forget that we have to be the miracle workers. And Detroit is full of miracle workers. And I'm just so happy to see you. Yeah.
I didn't even know that was her sitting there.
Well, I saw a little church hand popping up here and there, and I was like, I think I know who that is. And that's when I put my glasses on. I was like, I do know who that is.
Yeah.
And then when I saw y'all playing Catch Me If You Can, I was like, hold up, I know what's happening. So I love you.
I'm so glad to know that this work is happening.
Yeah.
Detroit is
thank you.
vibrant when it comes to the farming.
I can't even tell you
Yeah.
how many tons of food that is harvested in Detroit each year, but it is tons and tons. Somebody got the number? No? Okay.
Gazillion
But
billion.
it's huge.
There's one of the first chapters in my book is on food sovereignty with Leah Penniman from Soulfire Farm, who's a friend back east. And I just wanted to reflect back what you were making me think of, which is she described what her daughter said, which is the food system is everything it takes to get sunshine to your plate. And I love that. And then this is probably familiar. I got this.
I'm your page turner.
I appreciate the support. I'm sure this is familiar to some of you, but the metaphor for how we think about change in terms of a butterfly of transformative social justice with the 4 winglets, right? And the butterflies need all 4. So One is resist. The other is reform, a lot of the slow, painful, bureaucratic work that I often find myself in the midst
Unsexy, I
of,
think
the
you're saying.
unsexy. And then there's building the alternatives. That's a lot of the what if we get it right question, although there's plenty of reform and resist in there too. And the final one is heal, that we need this, not just trifecta, but this quartet of things to keep us balanced and going forward. And I just, if it's helpful, Leah said something to me that will stick with me forever, which is the number one thing is that the earth is madly in love with you. And you need to participate in that romance. We need to get back with the program of our relationship with the earth.
I want to end this beautiful conversation with your climate oath, and what we have printed here. And if you don't have the book, please get the book, because the climate oath and everything in it is thematic of the entire What If We Get It Right work. Climate oath. I make these devotions to climate solutions for my community and for our magnificent planet. I love that you call them devotions. First, move from I to we.
This is the one you repeat after. Ready? First, move from I to we.
First, move from I to we.
You want to lead it? And we'll repeat?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay.
We will expand our sense of interdependence. We will rein in our sense of individualism. We will ask, what should we do together? Survival is collective. Our fates are intertwined. Second, do no harm.
Second, do no harm.
We will restore and heal, not pollute and deplete. We will regenerate ecosystems and our own resolve. We will live lightly as part of the earth. Accountability, generosity, and sweetness. Third, less is more.
Third, less is more.
We will expand our creativity and contract our consumerism. We will conserve and distinguish between needing and wanting. We will be gentle with our own perfections and others. There is imperfections.
Like, come on, Beyonce. I know for the rest of us, it's imperfections.
There is such a thing as enough. Basta. Possibility exists.
Possibility exists.
This is a world of our making. We can remake it, remix it, restore it, rebalance it. The path of least resistance is only one of many paths. I will be part of getting it right.
We will be part of getting it right.
We will be part of getting it right.
We will be part
of getting it right. Oh, y'all did that.
We're rebellious and
do it
a
again.
little troublesome.
So this is, I gotta tell you both, thank you. Urban Consulate had, took a break for a year because we needed the space. There were some personal things that were going on that we needed to tend to. And I cannot tell you how elated we are to start up our new season with the both of you. While this work is urgent and while it is palpable, the space, the loving space that you all created, filled with joy. You said nourished joy in your book, right? Nourished with joy, singed with truth, is the space that we, I think, are all working to create and live in every single day. And so thank you for this glimpse, and thank you for bringing yourselves as offerings to this space, if even for a little while. Y'all give it up for them.